The kitchen smelled of boiled potatoes and something I could not name. It was the smell of silence. My mother-in-law stood at the stove, stirring a pot that did not need stirring. She had not turned around since I walked through the door. My baby had been dead for 7 days. The house was full of food brought by neighbors. It was empty of everything else. Without looking at me, she said, "The kitchen has ears, Martha. Best remember that." I was 22. I had buried my first child 6 days before, and the only sound in that house was a wooden spoon scraping against iron. "The kitchen is listening," she said again, softer, like she was talking to the potatoes. My name is Martha. I was born Amish, raised in a settlement in Lancaster County, where the fields run until they meet a sky the same gray as the barn wood. I left when I was 27, left my husband, my community, my family, and the grave of my firstborn child. There are things I was never permitted to say. But the kitchen said them for me. It always did. I'm not telling this story for revenge or for shock. I'm telling it because there's a weight to being a woman in a closed world that's never meant to be spoken aloud. I want to speak it now. This is what grief looks like inside a system built to forbid it. I married Jacob at 19. A farmer, kind in the way Amish men are permitted to be kind, he never raised his voice, never raised a hand, always paid the bills. We didn't know each other well. That isn't how it works. Your parents agree, the bishop agrees, the community agrees, and love is a garden you're told will grow later. Sometimes it does. We lived in a small house on his father's land, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen facing east that was the center of everything, where I cooked, cleaned, prayed, and wept. Always silently. In our world, silence is a virtue. It is also a cage. You learn to cry without making a sound. You learn to swallow your own breath. I gave birth to my daughter in winter, long labor. The kind of pain you're told is Eve's punishment, passed down. I didn't cry out. I gripped the bedpost and breathed. When the midwife laid her on my chest, something broke open in me that I hadn't known was sealed shut. Rachel, that was the name I chose, after Jacob's grandmother, since naming a child after someone living is considered prideful. I thought the name would protect her. I thought the dead would watch over her. I was wrong about a great many things that year. Rachel lived 3 months. A cough that wouldn't leave became a fever. The fever became a rattling in her chest, like dry leaves being crushed underfoot. I brought her to the bishop's wife, to my mother, to the midwife. Each one told me the same thing. Pray, it's God's will. The Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Our community's rules on medicine aren't the same everywhere. Plenty of Amish families work closely with outside doctors, and church districts vary widely on this. Ours did not. In our district, the Ordnung held that faith must come before medicine unless the bishop granted permission for a hospital. He didn't grant it. He called it a test. I held Rachel and felt her breath thinning. Her skin went gray. She looked at me with something in her eyes I still can't name. Not fear. Something older. The look of someone already leaving, but still in the room. She died on a Tuesday afternoon, the light the color of old straw. I was rocking her, singing the hymn my mother used to sing to me when her body went still. I knew before I even looked down. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat there, holding her, and didn't move for a long time. Jacob came in from the barn. He looked at me. He looked at her. He said nothing, just walked to the window and stood with his back to me, staring at the field. That was the moment I understood. In this house, grief wasn't something you shared. It was something you carried alone, in the same room with someone's back turned to you. The community came, the way they always do, with casseroles, bread, pies, food to feed the living. But no one spoke of the dead. No one said her name. No one asked how I was feeling. That would be too personal, too prideful, too much human emotion set above God's will. Hugs came tight and fast, but no one looked at my face. The men shook Jacob's hand and said, The Lord knows best. She's in a better place. No one asked if I wanted to keep the blanket that still smelled like her. No one asked if I'd said goodbye. I thought the silence would drive me mad. The house was full of people and noise, and I was a ghost in it, the mother whose child had died. It was never said aloud, but everyone carried the same unspoken verdict. Somehow, it was my fault. It's always the mother's fault. No one says it, everyone knows it. 3 days after Rachel died, the bishop sat in our kitchen with Jacob and my father-in-law. The funeral would be Sunday. They'd build the coffin from barnwood. And I should not, he said, cry too loudly at the service. It would disturb the spirit. I heard it from the next room, sitting on the bed with the quilt Rachel had been wrapped in. I heard my father-in-law agree. I heard Jacob say nothing at all. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went down to the kitchen and stood at the window, looking at the dark fields, thinking about Rachel's fingers, the way she turned her head when I spoke, the fact that she never had a voice to say goodbye. I leaned against the counter and let myself cry, not softly, not this time. A terrible sound came out of me, the sound of something breaking that couldn't be repaired. That's when I heard her behind me. My mother-in-law stood in the shadows of the hallway in her nightgown, having come down the stairs without a sound. She didn't move toward me, she didn't speak right away. Then, "You must learn to grieve in silence, Martha. The neighbors are watching. They've been watching since the baby was born. Don't give them the satisfaction." She walked past me to the stove and lifted the lid on the cast-iron pot, empty, cleaned hours ago. She checked it anyway, deliberately, in the dark. She wanted me to see her do it. "The kitchen is the heart of the house," she said. "It sees everything. It hears everything. The women in this family have been keeping their secrets in this kitchen for generations. You will too." I'd never been alone with her like this, never heard her say so many words at once. "Do you understand me?" Her voice wasn't unkind, just flat, the voice of someone who'd learned to survive by keeping everything inside. "The walls have ears, the children have ears, the bishop has ears. But the kitchen is different. You can tell the kitchen anything, just never let it leave the room." She finally turned to look at me. Her eyes were the color of the pot, black, and somehow empty and full at once. I saw the ghost of a baby she must have buried once too. I saw a young woman who'd been told, decades before me, to be quiet. I saw myself, 40 years from now. "Say it," she said. "Say it to the kitchen. Say it to me. I won't tell a soul. But you need to say it." I opened my mouth. I wanted to tell her I felt buried alive, that I'd watched the life drain out of my daughter's face while the world didn't even pause. That I hated the bishop, the ordnung, the silence, the stove, the pots, this kitchen that held all our secrets like a tomb. Nothing came out. I'd learned the silence too well. She watched me for a long moment, then nodded, like she understood exactly what my silence meant. "It takes time," she said. "It will come. The kitchen will wait." She left me alone in the kitchen. The stove had gone cold. I stood there a long time, feeling something shift in me that wasn't grief, something else. Anger, maybe. Or the first thread of a decision I wouldn't act on for years. I understood finally what she'd offered me. Not a hug, not an apology, not even my name spoken aloud. She'd told me the kitchen was listening, and that the women in her family kept their secrets there. And in telling me that, she was inviting me into a hidden world. Not rebellion, survival. The only way women in our world could carry weight that wasn't allowed to be carried anywhere else. So I tried it her way. I told the kitchen my secrets, that I dreamed of Rachel, that I woke up reaching for her in the night, that I was angry at God, that some mornings I wanted to walk out the door and never come back. I whispered these things at the stove, stirring pots with nothing in them. Midnight, dawn. I kept them there, and nowhere else. But secrets like that don't stay small. They grow. I started seeing the other women in our community differently. The stillness in them, the pause before they answered a question, the way they'd glance at their husbands sideways instead of straight on. Every kitchen I stood in after that, I saw the same thing. A woman grieving something she was never allowed to name. A lost child. An unkind husband. A mother she wasn't permitted to miss. A life she never chose. None of it was spoken. All of it there, kneaded into every loaf of bread until the tears in the dough had long since dried. I stayed 5 more years. I had a son, and he lived, and I loved him more than I have words for. But I couldn't give him a mother who was whole. I was hollow by then, a kitchen that had held too much for too long. My mother-in-law died that last winter. I found her myself, sitting in her chair by the stove, hands folded, eyes closed. Finally, for the first time I'd ever seen her, at peace. I was the one who cleared her kitchen drawers afterward. No one else wanted to. In the bottom of the flour tin, wrapped in a square of yellowed muslin, I found a tiny embroidered gown, small enough to fit in one hand. Sewn into the hem, in thread gone brown with age, were 2 initials and a year. 41 years before I ever set foot in that kitchen. The baby I'd imagined in her eyes that night wasn't imagined at all. I understood that now. She hadn't been teaching me her rule in the dark. She'd been keeping it herself, alone, for 41 years. And for one night, she'd let me stand close enough to feel its weight. She never said the child's name to me. I never found it written anywhere. She had buried her daughter the way I was told to bury mine, in silence, in a kitchen, with no one allowed to ask. I sat a long while with that gown in my hands. I wasn't afraid of death. I'd already held it once, in my own arms. What I understood, finally, was that death isn't the worst thing that can happen to a person. Living a whole life without ever saying the truth out loud, and dying with it still folded in a drawer, is worse. If you're watching this, I don't know where you are or what you've survived. But I know you've survived something. I know there's a version of grief in you that you were never given permission to feel. A kitchen, a stove, a dark hallway where you've said things out loud to no one but the walls, because there was no one else who could hear them safely. That silence you were taught was never a flaw in you. It was inherited, passed hand to hand, mother to daughter, like a recipe nobody wrote down. And an inheritance can be set down. It doesn't have to be carried to the grave the way my mother-in-law carried hers. I'm not telling you to burn your life down. I didn't leave because leaving was righteous. I left because I couldn't breathe anymore, and I still carry the guilt of the son I left behind every single day. I'm telling you something smaller and harder. What you feel is real, even if no one around you will look at it directly. Even if the only place you've ever said it out loud is a kitchen, at midnight, to no one. My name is Martha. I was Amish. I'm not anymore. This channel is my kitchen now. It's where I bring the things I was never allowed to say and hand them to you instead. If you want to hear more, subscribe. If you need to hear that you're not the only one who's ever whispered to an empty room, stay. The kitchen is listening. This time, it's listening for you.